Her assigned room was larger than her entire apartment. The king-sized bed was draped in pristine white linens, and the sitting area by the window offered a breathtaking view of the gardens. Calla set her bag down, feeling upping absurdly out of place. "This will be your room," Rowan said. "If you need anything and use the intercom, mate." "Thanks," she said, unsure if she meant it. Rowan lingered for a moment, his sharp gaze flicking over her as if assessing something. Then without a word he left, closing the door behind him. Calla let out a breath that she hadn't realized she'd been holding, and flopped onto the bed. "This is insane," she muttered, staring at the ornate ceiling. "What am I even doing here?" The rest of the day passed in a blur of awkward encounters with staff who treated her like a porcelain doll, and the suffocating sense that she didn't belong. By dinner, she was ready to crawl out of her skin. The dining room was just as intimidating as the rest of the estate. A long table stretched across the room. Only 2 places were set, one at each end. Lucien was already seated, his sharp suit exchanged for a casual button-down. That somehow made him look even more infuriatingly attractive. "Enjoying your stay so far?" he asked, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. "It's overwhelming." She admitted, sitting down across from him. "You'll adjust," he said simply. Calla bristled. "You keep saying that like it's inevitable." "Because it is." Certainty in his voice made her stomach twist. After dinner, Calla wandered the halls, needing space to clear her head. She stopped in front of a large window overlooking the gardens, the moonlight casting the flowers in a silvery glow. "His place is a prison," she muttered. "Funny," a voice said behind her, making her jump. She turned to see Rowan leaning against the wall, his arms crossed and his expression unreadable. "Are you always lurking? Where is it just me?" she asked, her voice tinged with annoyance. Rowan smirked, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Just keeping an eye on things, right?" she said, rolling her eyes. "Because I'm such a threat." Rowan's smirk faded, replaced by a seriousness that made her uneasy. Cardi Portnord, you don't understand what you've stepped into, Calla. None of this is a coincidence. Her brow furrowed. "What are you talking about?" Before he could answer, a sharp voice interrupted Rowan. Lucien said, his tone a command. Rowan straightened, his expression unreadable. Alpha Calla's gaze darted between them, her confusion deepening. Alpha Lucien ignored her, his sharp eyes locked on Rowan. A word, Rowan nodded and followed Lucien down the hall, leaving Calla standing alone. Curiosity got the better of her, and she crept after them, keeping to the shadows. She stopped outside a half-open door, straining to hear their voices. She's not ready," Rowan said, his voice low but firm. "She doesn't need to be," Lucien replied. "She'll learn," Rowan hesitated. "And if she doesn't?" Lucien's tone turned cold. "Then she won't survive." Calla's breath caught her, pulse racing. "Whatever. What the hell have I gotten myself into?" she whispered, her unease deepening as she slipped away unnoticed. Chapter 6. Calla's pulse thundered in her ears as she pressed herself against the wall. Outside Lucien's study, her breath shallow and quiet. She knew it was a terrible idea to eavesdrop, but after last night's scripted conversation between Lucien and Rowan, her curiosity burned hotter than her sense of self-preservation. Inside, their voices were low but intense, and every word felt like a jigsaw piece to a puzzle she hadn't asked to solve. She's adjusting to slowly," Rowan said, his tone laced with disapproval. "We don't have time for this, Lucien." "She'll adapt," Lucien replied, calm but firm. "Calla is stronger than you give her credit for." "You're gambling with the pack," Rowan snapped. "If she can't handle the truth enough," Lucien said sharply, a single word brimming with authority, "I decide what risks to take." Calla leaned closer, her heart pounding the pack. What truth and why did she feel like the answer was going to make her regret not running for the hills the moment she signed that stupid contract? The door creaked open suddenly and Drowan stepped out, his amber eyes immediately locking onto her. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. Hala's mouth opened but no words came out. Before she could stammer a reply, Lucien appeared in the doorway. Behind him, Rowan. Lucien said, his voice like ice. "Leave us." Rowan hesitated, his gaze flicking between them before he nodded curtly, then disappeared down the hall. "Inside," Lucien said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Tala swallowed hard and stepped into the study, a heavy door clicking shut behind her. Lucien stood by the desk, his sharp blue eyes cutting through her like a blade. "You were eavesdropping," he said. Not a question, but a statement. Ayla folded her arms, trying to summon some semblance of confidence. "You're not exactly forthcoming with information." "So, yeah, I was." Sumi. Lucien's smirk was cold and dangerous, sending a shiver down her spine. "You have no idea what you're meddling in. And explain it to me," she shot back. "Because right now, all I know is that I've been dragged into something that makes zero sense. Then no one will tell me why." Lucien studied her for a long moment, his gaze unreadable. Then he sighed, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. "You're not ready for the full truth." Kala bristled. "Try me. You won't like it." "I already don't like any of this." "So, what's one more thing?" His lips twitched, almost as if he wanted to smile but didn't. "Stubborn. Another reason you'll survive." Kala blinked. "What does that mean?" Before Lucien could answer, a low growl echoed from somewhere outside the room. Kala froze, her skin prickling as the sound vibrated through the air. "What was that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lucien's expression darkened. "Stay here." "Like hell I will." Ala followed him as he strode to the door, her fear momentarily drowned out by anger. Lucien shot her a warning look. "Kala, don't." The growl came again, louder this time, followed by the distinct sound of something heavy crashing. Lucien muttered a curse under his breath and stepped into the hall. All had railed behind him. Despite the icy glare, he shot her way. The commotion led them to a large sitting room, where a man, if you could call him that, stood in the wreckage of a shattered coffee table. His chest heaved, and his amber eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, his form trembling, as though barely holding itself together. Ezekiel." Lucien said, his voice sharp. "Stand down." The man coughed. Ezekiel snarled, his teeth allignating into sharp points. Alice tumbled back, her breath catching in her throat. "What the hell?" she whispered. Lucien stepped between her and Ezekiel, his posture calm but brimming with authority. "I said stand down." Ezekiel growled again, but after a tense moment, he dropped to one knee, his head bowed. "Forgive me, Alpha," he said, his voice rough and guttural. "Alpha." "Callous." Head spun as the pieces started falling into place. Lucien nodded, his tone firm but not unkind. "Control yourself. You're no use to me like this." Ezekiel rose shakily, his form beginning to steady, though his glowing eyes lingered on Kala for a moment. "Arr." Too long. Lucien's voice dropped dangerously low, eyes off her. Ezekiel flinched and left without another word, disappearing down the hall. Kala turned to Lucien, her legs trembling beneath her. "What was that?" Lucien's gaze softened slightly, though the tension in his posture remained. "I warned you, Kala. You're not ready for this." "Oh, you dare," she snapped, anger flaring despite her fear. "I just saw a man turn into whatever that was. You owe me an explanation." Lucien sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. "He's a werewolf, part of my pack." The words hung in the air, absurd and impossible, yet undeniable after what she just witnessed. Alan laughed, the sound high and hysterical. "Oh, sure, werewolves, of course." "Why not?" Lucien stepped closer, his expression calm but unyielding. "This is my world, Kala, the one you've been brought into, the one I've sworn to protect." She backed away, her chest tightening. "No, This is too much. I'm out, Kala. No. She interrupted her, voice shaking. I didn't sign up for this, I can't. Lucien's eyes darkened, his presence filling the room. You can't leave. Watch me, she turned and bolted, her feet pounding against the polished floors. As she raced toward the front door, her breath came in ragged gasps, panic clawing at her chest. She reached the door, fumbling with the lock. But before she could open it, Lucien was there. Let me go, she shouted, spinning to face him. And his gaze was sharper now, the blue of his eyes flickering with a strange, otherworldly glow. You can't run from this, Kala. Her back hit the door as he stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask for you, he said softly, his voice a mix of anger and something deeper. But here we are. The air around them seemed to from heavy and electric. Lucien's jaw clenched, his hands curling into fists, as if he was holding something back. You're mine now, Kala, he said, his voice low and filled with a raw primal intensity. There's no going back. For a brief, terrifying moment, his teeth elongated, sharp and predatory, and the faintest growl rumbled in his chest. Kala's breath hitched, her fear mingling with something she couldn't quite name. She didn't know whether to scream, cry, or faint. But one thing was, her life would never be the same. Chapter 7. Kala wasn't sure what she expected when Lucien told her they'd be introducing her to the pack. This certainly wasn't it. She stood awkwardly in the middle of the estate's vast, great room, feeling very much like a rabbit surrounded by wolves. Literal ones, she reminded herself. Lucien's pack members filled the space, their presence commanding and frankly intimidating. As they moved with a fluidity that made her hyper-aware of her own clumsiness. Their sharp gazes, assessing her in ways that made her want to bolt for the nearest exit. Relax, Lucien said softly, standing close enough that his presence felt like a shield against the weight of all those eyes. Easy for you to say, Kala muttered, her voice barely audible over the hum of low conversation. You're not the one being scrutinized, like a bug under a microscope. You're stronger than you think, he replied, his tone carrying a note of finality that left no room for argument. She wasn't sure whether to thank him or smack him. The first to approach was Rowan, of course. He seemed to have a knack for making her feel unsettled, and today was no exception. Alpha, he said, nodding to Lucien, before turning his sharp gaze on Kala. Miss O'Board, Rowan, she replied, her tone attempting cordiality, landing closer to sarcasm. You're handling this better than I expected, he said, his words carefully measured but lacking warmth. Gee, thanks, Kala said, folding her arms. That's exactly the confidence boost I needed. Rowan's lips twitched. The almost smile didn't reach his eyes. Let's hope your resilience matches your wit, Rowan, Lucien said warningly, his tone making it clear the conversation was over. Rowan stepped back, his expression unreadable. But not before Kala caught the faintest flicker of doubt. Or was it curiosity in his eyes? If Rowan was a cold front, Lucien Wolfe was a full-blown blizzard. Lucien's sister swept into the room like she owned it, her platinum blonde hair gleaming under the soft light, and her tailored black outfit clinging to her doll, willowy frame. Kala instantly disliked her, which was convenient, since the feeling appeared to be mutual. So, Lucien said, her voice dripping with disdain, as her sharp gray eyes raked over Kala. This be the girl causing all the fuss. Lucien said, his voice carrying a note of warning. What she said innocently, though her smirk said otherwise. I'm just saying it's surprising she's so. Lucien gestured vaguely at Kala, as though the mere act of existing was an insult. Human Kala offered, her voice sharper than she intended. Marcellini's smirk widened. Delicate Kala bristled but forced herself to stay calm. You know, for someone who clearly shops in the Cruel D. Ill section. You're awfully judgmental. Lucien's lips twitched, but Marcellini's icy smile remained firmly in place. Charming, she said, though the word sounded more like a dismissal. I'm sure this will go splendidly. With that, she turned on her heel and swept away, leaving Kella feeling like she'd been hit by a frosty hurricane. Well, she's delightful, Kella muttered. Lucien smirked. Don't take it personally. Marcellini's like that with everyone. There's handouts like that. As the introductions continued, I couldn't help but notice the unspoken hierarchy within the pack, the way they deferred to Lucien with quiet respect. Or in some cases open fear, spoke volumes about his authority. That also made her painfully aware of her own position. She wasn't just an outsider, she was a wild card, an anomaly in their tightly woven structure. Whispers followed her as she moved through the room, snippets of conversation barely audible. But impossible to ignore. She doesn't belong here. What does the alpha see in her? She'll be a liability. Kella clenched her fists, her frustration bubbling under the surface. She'd never asked to be part of this world, but now that she was here, she wasn't going to let them push her around. By the time the gathering ended, Kella was emotionally exhausted. Lucien led her to a smaller sitting room, his expression unreadable, as he closed the door behind them. That went well, she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm, as she collapsed onto a plush sofa. Lucien raised an eyebrow. Considering the circumstances, it could have been worse. Oh, good, she said, throwing up her hands. We've officially set the bar. It could have been worse. He smirked, taking a seat across from her. You handled yourself well. Most people wouldn't have lasted 5 minutes in that room. Yeah, well, I've had plenty of practice dealing with difficult people. She said it's called working retail. Lucien chuckled softly, a sound low and unexpected, stronger than you give yourself credit for, Kella. His sincerity in his voice caught her off guard, and she didn't know how to respond. As the evening wore on, Kella tried to make sense of her new reality. The hierarchy, the constant tension. It was all so far removed from the life she'd known. The one thing was clear. Lucien's world was dangerous, and she was in way over her head. Later that night, as she wandered the estate, she overheard voices coming from Lucien's office. The door was ajar and she hesitated, torn between curiosity and self-preservation. You know this won't be easy. Rowan said, his voice low but insistent. I didn't expect it to be, Lucien replied. But she's essential. You know that as well as I do. She's not ready, Rowan said. And if she falters, she won't, Lucien interrupted, his tone carrying a dangerous edge. Rowan sighed. I hope you're right. Because if you're wrong, it's not just her life at stake. Kella's breath caught her stomach twisting with an ease. She stepped back, careful not to make a sound, and retreated to her room. Whatever Lucien and Rowan were planning, it was clear she was at the center of it, and that terrified her. Chapter 8. Kella stared at the fire pit, blazing, in the center of the pack's outdoor gathering space. Her arms crossed tightly over her chest. The evening air was sharp and crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine smoke, and something she couldn't quite place. Something wild. She couldn't believe she was here. Or, scratch that she couldn't believe any of this. You're sulking, Lucien said, stepping up beside her. Kella shot him a glare. I am not sulking. I'm contemplating. Lucien raised an eyebrow, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. Contemplating what? Whether or not I'll survive the night, she said flatly. We'll be fine, he said with maddening confidence. You keep saying that. And yet, here I am, surrounded by people who'd probably love to see me trip into that fire. She gestured toward the glowing flames. I'll come around, Lucien said, his tone softening. That. First you need to prove you belong. Kella groaned. Can I just get a t-shirt that says I'm trying? Okay, and call it a day. Lucien's low chuckle sent a shiver down her spine. I'm afraid it doesn't work like that. Of course it didn't. Because nothing about this world, his pack these people was easy. The first ritual of the evening was something Rowan called a marking, which sounded ominous enough to make Kala wish she'd stayed in bed. It's symbolic, Rowan explained as the pack members began to gather. An acknowledgement of your place within the pack. And if I don't want a place within the pack, Kala asked. Her voice stinged with sarcasm. Then you're wasting everyone's time, Marceline said, appearing like a frosty shadow at Kala's side. Kala resisted the urge to roll her eyes. You're just a ray of sunshine, aren't you? Careful, Marceline said, her tone icy. You might be Lucien's little project. That doesn't mean you're untouchable, Marceline. Lucien's voice cut through the tension like a blade. He stepped forward, his presence commanding enough to make Marcellini's smirk falter. Just offering some friendly advice, Marceline said sweetly before sauntering off. Kala exhaled sharply, feeling her frustration mount. How do you stand her? Lucien's smirk returned. She's loyal and she's not wrong. You'll need to stand your ground. Great, because that's been working so well for me, Kala muttered. The ritual began with a circle of pack members forming around the fire pit, their gazes sharp and expectant. Kala stood in the center, trying to look less like a deer in headlights and more like someone who had some semblance of control over her life. Rowan stepped forward, holding a bowl filled with what looked like a mixture of herbs and dash. You'll speak your name and pledge your loyalty to the Alpha. He said, his tone as unyielding as ever. Kala raised an eyebrow. That's it, no blood sacrifices. Not tonight, Rowan replied dryly, earning a few chuckles from the crowd. She glanced at Lucien, who gave her an encouraging nod. Her pulse quickened as all eyes turned to her. This was it, her moment to prove she wasn't just some outsider. Fumbling her way through their world, taking a deep breath, she stepped forward. I'm Kala Arbor, she said, her voice steady, despite the nerves twisting in her stomach. And I pledge my loyalty to the Alpha. The words felt strange in her mouth, but as soon as she spoke them, Rowan dipped his fingers into the bowl and marked her forehead with the ash mixture. It is done, he said, his voice carrying an odd weight. The pack murmured their approval, though Kala caught more than a few skeptical glances. Still, it was a small victory and she'd take it. Later that night, the atmosphere shifted. The formalities of the ritual gave way to a more relaxed gathering, with pack members laughing, sharing drinks and exchanging stories. Kala found herself perched on a log near the fire, sipping something warm and spicy that Rowan had handed her, without explanation. You survived, Rowan said, sitting down beside her. Barely, she replied. A small smile tugged at her lips. You did better than most, Woody admitted. Even if Marceline is still sharpening her claws for you. How well she can get in line, Kala said, her smile fading. I'm not here to make friends, good, Rowan said. Because that's not why Lucien brought you here. His words hung in the air, heavy and unspoken. Kala glanced at him, trying to read his expression. As usual, he gave nothing away. What does that mean? She asked, her voice quieter now. Rowan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stared into the fire, his amber eyes glowing faintly in the flickering light. It means your place here isn't just about loyalty. It's about survival. The words sent a chill down her spine. Survival from what? Before he could answer, a low growl rumbled from somewhere behind them. Kala turned sharply, her breath catching as she saw one of the pack members. His face contorted, his muscles bulging, his body caught mid-transformation. The shift was violent, primal, and utterly horrifying. Bones cracked and reformed. Claws extended and fur rippled over his skin. Oh my God, Kala whispered, her voice trembling. Stay back, Rowan said sharply, stepping in front of her. The transformed wolfman snarled, his glowing eyes locking onto Kala for a brief, terrifying moment. Then, with a sharp bark from Lucien, he backed down, his massive form retreating into the shadows. Kala's legs felt like jelly as she turned to Lucien, who approached with calm authority. What the hell was that? That, Lucien said, his voice steady, is the reality of this world. My world. Calla stared at him, her chest heaving. I can't do this. I can't be part of this. You already are, he said, his gaze unwavering. Whether you like it or not. The rest of the night passed in a blur. Calla retreated to the estate, her mind racing with everything she'd seen and heard. She wanted to leave, to run as far away from this insanity as possible, but deep down she knew there was no escape. As she sat in her room staring out the window, there was a soft knock at the door. Come in, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Lucien entered, his expression softer than usual. He didn't speak immediately, instead taking a feet across from her. You were brave tonight, he said finally. Calla let out a bitter laugh. I was terrified. That's normal, he said, his voice gentle. But you didn't back down. That matters. She turned to him, her eyes searching his face. Why me, Lucien? Why am I here? His gaze darkened, the weight of his answer heavy in the silence. Because you're stronger than you realize. And because I need you. The words sent a shiver down her spine, though she couldn't tell if it was fear or something else. Before she could respond, a knock at the door interrupted them. Rowan stepped inside, his expression grim. I have a problem, he said. Lucien rose, his posture tense. What is it? Arrival Alpha is here, Rowan said. He's demanding a meeting. Calla's heart sank as Lucien's jaw tightened. Whatever was happening, she had a feeling it wasn't good. Stay here, Lucien said, his voice firm as he turned to leave. Calla watched him go, her unease growing. She had no idea what kind of danger was lurking in the shadows. But one thing was clear. Her life was no longer her own. Chapter 9. Calla hovered near the hallway, meeting to Lucien's office. Alright, found Inez. Muffled voices reached her ears. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop. Well, not this time. The sharp edge in Lucien's tone, and the low growl of the rival Alpha, that her rooted to the spot. She shouldn't be here. She knew that, but her curiosity had teeth and it bit deep. Your pack is weaker than it's ever been, Lucien. Her voice rumbled deep and laced with menace. You can't afford to ignore the cracks forming under your rule. And not ignoring anything, Lucien said, his voice low but lethal. My pack is strong and we honor the terms of our pact. If you've come to challenge that, tread carefully. Calla peeked around the corner, her breath catching at the sight of the rival Alpha. He was tall and broad, with dark weathered skin, and golden eyes that gleamed like molten metal. There was something feral about the way he stood, his movements deliberate and coiled, like a predator waiting to strike. Beside him, Lucien was the picture of control. Though the tension in his jaw and the faint glow in his blue eyes betrayed the storm beneath the surface. I didn't come here to challenge you, the rival Alphas, at a smirk playing at his lips. Not yet, anyway. His gaze flicked toward the doorway, and for a terrifying moment, Calla thought he'd spotted her. You came here to waste my time, then Lucien said dryly. The Alpha's smirk widened. I came to warn you. Your pack is vulnerable. And not just from the outside. Keep your house in order, Wolf. Otherwise someone else will. Lucien's growl was so low and menacing, it sent a chill down Calla's spine. Leave now, the rival Alpha smirk didn't waver, as he turned and strode toward the door. Calla pressed herself against the wall, hoping to stay out of sight, but her luck ran out. Well, the Alpha said, his golden eyes locking onto hers. What's this, a human in the wolf's den? Hey. Calla's pulse spiked, but she refused to cower. I'm not just a human, she said, crossing her arms and forcing her voice to stay steady. I'm part of this pack. The Alpha chuckled, a low arc sound. Is that so? And what exactly is your role here, little human? Calla opened her mouth, scrambling for a response, but Lucien's voice cut through the tension. Like a blade, she's none of your concern, Lucien said, stepping between them. His tone was calm, but the barely restrained fury in his eyes was impossible to miss. The rival alpha's gaze lingered on Kala, his smirk deepening. Careful, Wolf, your attachments could be your undoing. Kala bristled. I think you've overstayed your welcome, she said, her voice sharper than she intended. The alpha raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised, and maybe a little amused by her boldness. Feisty, I'll give you that. Goodbye, Jarek. Oh, Lucien said, his voice final. Jarek turned and left without another word, his presence lingering like smoke. Even after the door closed behind him, Lucien rounded on Kala, his eyes blazing. What were you thinking? Kala straightened, refusing to shrink under his glare. I was thinking that. I'm tired of being treated like I don't belong here. You could have been hurt. Lucien snapped, his voice rising. Do you have any idea how dangerous he is? Kala crossed her arms, her frustration boiling over. I didn't exactly invite him to taunt me, Lucien. And for the record, held my own just fine. Lucien stared at her, his jaw clenched and his eyes still glowing faintly. This isn't a game, Kala. Jarek doesn't make idle threats. And neither do I, she shot back. If I'm part of this pack, and I'm not going to stand on the sidelines while people like him walk all over us. Something shifted in Lucien's expression, anger giving way to something deeper. Something that sent a shiver through her. You're infuriating, he said softly. You're welcome, she replied, her voice steady, despite the adrenaline surging through her veins. For a long moment they stood there, the air between them charged and heavy. And to her surprise, Lucien's lips twitched into a faint smile. You're stronger than I expected, he said, his voice low and almost admiring. Well, she said, her cheeks flushing. You're not exactly easy to impress, Lucien chuckled, the sound rumbling in his chest. You'd be surprised. The encounter with Jerry K had ripple effects. Words spread quickly through the pack, and by the next day, Kala found herself the subject of more than a few whispers. She stood up to Jay. Eric, one pack member, murmured, his tone equal parts disbelief and curiosity. They heard she didn't even flinch, another said. Even Rowan, who rarely offered praise, gave her a curt nod when they crossed paths. It wasn't much, but it felt like progress. Of course, Marceline remained as frosty as ever. Don't let the attention go to your head, she said, her tone dripping with condescension. One act of bravery doesn't make you one of us. I don't need your approval, Marceline, Kala said, surprising herself with how steady her voice was. Shed Marcellini's icy smile didn't waver. Good, because you'll never have it. Kala watched her walk away, her frustration bubbling under the surface. But instead of dwelling on it, she let the victory of the previous night bolster her. Later that evening, Kala found herself in the study with Lucien. A tension between them less sharp but still present. You're quiet, Lucien said, glancing up from the documents spread across his desk. I'm just processing, Kala admitted, sinking into one of the chairs. This world of yours, it's a lot. Lucien's gaze softened, and for a moment he looked less like the alpha, and more like the man behind the title. I know it's not easy. Why do you do it, she asked. Carry all of this on your shoulders. Lucien leaned back in his chair, his expression contemplative. Because I have to. The pack depends on me and I won't let them down. There was a weight to his words that made her chest tighten. For all his confidence and authority, she could see the burden he carried, the sacrifices he made to protect his people. You're not as invincible as you pretend to be, he said softly. Lucien's lips twitched, but his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. And you're not as fragile as you think. Kala held his gaze, something unspoken passing between them. It wasn't romantic exactly. It was raw and real, and it left her feeling more connected to him than she wanted to admit. The peace didn't last long. As the evening wore on, Rowan entered the room, his expression grim. Jarek left a message, he said, handing Lucien a folded piece of paper. Lucien opened it, his jaw tightening as he read. "From what is it?" Kala asked, her unease growing. Lucien's eyes darkened as he folded the paper and set it aside. "A warning about what rebellion?" Lucien said simply, his tone carrying the weight of what was to come. Kala's chest tightened. The stakes of Lucien's world crashing down on her like a wave. Whatever was brewing, it was clear that she was now part of it, whether she liked it or not. Chapter 10. The tension in the estate was thick, enough to cut with a knife. Paula noticed it immediately, as she descended the grand staircase. The usual quiet, activity had been replaced by hushed whispers, sidelong glances, and the occasional, low growl from a passing pack member. "What's going on?" she asked a young man with sandy hair. One of the few pack members, who didn't look at her like she was an intruder. He hesitated, his gaze darting around. "You should ask the alpha," he said before scurrying away. Kala frowned. With secrecy was starting to get under her skin. She wasn't just an outsider here. She was the elephant in the room and she hated it. "Fine," she muttered. "I'll figure it out myself." She wandered the halls aimlessly at first, hoping to stumble upon some clue. But her search took a surprising turn when she noticed a crack in one of the walls near Lucien's office. Upon closer inspection, she realized it wasn't a crack at all. It was a seam, barely visible in what appeared to be a hidden door. "Really?" she whispered to herself. "He has a secret room. What is this, a spy movie?" Curiosity got the better of her. She pressed her fingers against the seam, and the door slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, the air was cool and heavy, tinged with the scent of old paper and something earthy. The room was lined with shelves crammed with books, scrolls, and artifacts that looked like they belonged in a museum. At the center of the room stood a table covered in maps and documents, each one scrawled with symbols and notes. She couldn't decipher. "What the hell is this?" she murmured. Stepping closer, a flicker of movement caught her eye when she turned to see a large glass case containing a dagger with an ornate handle. The blade gleamed faintly in the dim light, and something about it made her shiver. "This doesn't look ominous at all," she muttered. But her voice lacked its usual bite. Before she could examine it further, a voice behind her made her jump. "What are you doing in here?" She spun around to find Lucien standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable, but his eyes blazing with intensity. I got curious," she stammered, suddenly feeling like a kid. "Heart sneaking cookies before dinner." "His room is off limits," he said, stepping closer. His tone was calm, but there was an edge to it that made her heart race. "Clearly," she said, gesturing to the hidden door. "You can't just leave something like this lying around and not expect people to peek inside." Lucien's lips twitched, but his expression remained stern. "You shouldn't be here." Paula folded her arms, refusing to back down. "Maybe if you stopped keeping me in the dark, I wouldn't feel the need to snoop." And his gaze softened just slightly. "This isn't about keeping you in the dark. It's about keeping you safe. That's the thing," she said, her voice rising. "I don't feel safe. I feel like I've been thrown into the middle of a storm I didn't ask for, and no one will tell me what's going on." Lucien hesitated, his jaw tightening. "This room contains the history of my pack, the laws we live by and the truths we protect. It's not something I share lightly." "Maybe it's time you start," she said, her own quieter now. For a long moment they stood there, the tension between them thick and charged. Finally, Lucien sighed and gestured for her to sit at the table. Over the next hour, Lucien explained more than she'd expected. He spoke of the ancient pact that bound the werewolves, the territories they protected, and the rivalries that spanned generations. "This dagger," he said, gesturing to the weapon in the case, "is a symbol of the Alpha's authority. It's tied to the power I wield, and it's one of the reasons My enemies seek to weaken me. Kala's gaze shifted to the blade, her unease deepening. Further rival Alpha at Jarek. He's trying to take your power. Among other things, Lucien said, his tone grand. And someone in your pack is helping him, she said, her realization dawning on her. Lucien's jaw tightened on her. It's possible. Kala stared at him, the weight of his burden settling heavily in her chest. Why are they doing this? Betraying you power, he said simply. Ambition, fear, she frowned. You're their alpha. Don't they trust you? Trust is a fragile thing, he said. His voice ended with something she couldn't quite place. Regret, perhaps. And not everyone is loyal. When they see an opportunity to gain more for themselves. Her heart ached at the rawness in his tone. She reached out before she could stop herself, placing a hand on his arm. You're not in this alone, you know. Lucien's gaze snapped to hers. Something flickering in his eyes. That made her breath catch. Kala before he could finish, and the sharp sound of glass shattering echoed through the estate, followed by a chorus of panicked shouts. The attack was swift and brutal. Kala barely had time to process what was happening. So before Lucien was on his feet, barking orders to the pack members. Rushing into the room. Stay here, he told her, his voice commanding. My cow, I will, she shouted. He was already gone, leaving her alone in the chaos. Heart pounding, she crept out of the secret room and into the hallway, where the sound of growls and snarls sent hails down her spine. She caught a glimpse of a figure, a rogue werewolf, massive and snarling, as it lunged at one of Lucien's pack members. She ducked behind a pillar. Her breath coming in short gasps. This wasn't just a scuffle. It was a war, and she was caught in the middle of it. The fight spilled into the great room, where Lucien and Jarek faced off, in a clash of power and dominance. Kala could only watch her heart in her throat, as Lucien's form shimmered with a terrifying, primal energy. His movements were swift and brutal, a testament to his strength as an alpha. But G-Rich was relentless, his strikes calculated and cruel. For a moment, Callisto thought Lucien might falter. Then his gaze found hers, and something in his expression shifted. With a roar that sent shivers down her spine, Lucien unleashed a final devastating blow, sending J. Eric sprawling across the room. The rogues retreated, dragging their injured leader with them. The aftermath was a blur. The pact ended to their wounded. The estate, filled with a low hum of whispered conversations and tense glances. Kala found herself back in Lucien's study, her hands trembling as she tried to process what had just happened. Lucien entered, his shirt torn and bloodied, but his gaze steady as he approached her. Are you hurt? He asked, his voice soft. She shook her head, her throat tight. No, but Lucien, this is too much, I can't do this. You can, he said firmly, his hand brushing against hers. You're stronger than you think. And terrified, she admitted, her voice breaking. So am I, he said, his gaze locking onto hers. We don't have the luxury of running, Kala. Not anymore. The weight of his words settled over her. And for the first time she realized the truth in them. She couldn't run. Not from him. Not from this. Chapter 11. The morning after the attack dawned gray and heavy, as though even the weather had decided to mourn the state of the pack. Hugh awoke to the sound of muffled voices outside her door. For a moment, she thought about burrowing under the covers and pretending none of this was real. But reality had a way of barging in, whether she wanted it or not. She dragged herself out of bed, changed into something comfortable. Well, as comfortable as she could feel in Lucien's mansion, and stepped into the hallway. The tension in the air was palpable, a weight pressing down on her chest. As she made her way toward the source of the voices. In the dining room, Lucien Rowan and Ezekiel stood around a large table, scattered with maps, papers, and what looked like surveillance photos. Their faces were grim, and the low hum of their conversation stopped. The moment she entered, "Don't stop on my account," Kala said. Her voice sharper than intended. She folded her arms, unwilling to let the weight of their scrutiny get to her. "I think I've earned the right to know what's going on." Lucien exchanged a glance with Rowan, who nodded slightly before stepping back. Ezekiel, who Kala had only interacted with in passing, watched her with quiet intensity. His arms crossed over his broad chest. "It wasn't Jarek," Lucien said finally, his tone clipped. "The attack last night, it came from within the pack." Kala's heart sank. "You mean someone here betrayed you?" Lucien nodded his jaw at a splinter group. "They've been feeding information to Jarek and his rogues." Kala asked, her voice rising. "Why would they do that?" "Because they don't believe in my leadership," Lucien said, his eyes darkening. "And because they think they can do better without me." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken truths. Kala's gaze shifted to the table, her attention caught by one of the photos. It was blurry, but the figure in it was unmistakably familiar. "Young, who's that?" she asked, pointing to the photo. Lucien's hesitation was brief but noticeable. "Natasha," he said finally, one of the pack members who turned. "She's about my age," Kala said, her stomach twisting. "How does someone even get to that point?" "I losing faith," Rowan said, his voice low. "I letting doubt fester until it turns into rebellion." Kala frowned, a flicker of unease settling in her chest. "Why does this have to do with me?" Lucien didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. "They're not just after me," he said. Finally, his voice quieter. "Now they're after you too." Her stomach dropped. "Me? Why?" Lucien turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "Because of your bloodline." Kala blinked. "My what?" "It's complicated," Lucien said, his tone frustratingly vague. "Then uncomplicated," she snapped, her frustration boiling over. "I've been dragged into this mess without any explanation, and I'm done being kept in the dark. If there's something about me that makes me a target, I deserve to know." Lucien's jaw tightened. "Why?" Before he could respond, Rowan stepped in. She's right," Rowan said, his voice calm but firm. "If she's going to stay here and be part of this, she needs to know the truth." Lucien said, running a hand through his dark hair. "Fine, but not here. Ezekiel, take her to the training grounds." "We'll talk after." The training grounds were tucked behind the estate, a sprawling space surrounded by dense forest. Wooden dummies, sparring mats, and various weapons were scattered throughout the area, and the faint scent of pine hung in the air. Ezekiel handed her a pair of padded gloves, his expression serious. "You're going to learn how to protect yourself," he said simply. "Great," Kala muttered, slipping on the gloves. "Because last night wasn't traumatizing enough." "Your sarcasm won't help you in a fight," Ezekiel said, his voice dry but not unkind. "Neither will this," she shot back, gesturing to herself. "I'm not exactly built for combat." "Then we'll build you," Ezekiel said, stepping back, gesturing for her to take a fighting stance. Kala hesitated but complied, feeling awkward and out of place. "So, what now? Do I punch something?" "Not yet," he said. "First you learn balance. Without it, you're an easy target." The training was grueling, and Kala quickly realized just how out of her depth she was. As the minutes turned into hours, she started to find a rhythm, her movements becoming more fluid and less hesitant. Rowan arrived halfway through the session, leaning against a tree, with his usual air of detached observation. "She's not bad," he said, after watching her throw a particularly solid punch. Full eyes straightened, wiping sweat from her brow. "I think that's the closest thing to a compliment I've ever gotten from you." Rowan smirked. "Don't get used to." Ezekiel chuckled, stepping back to give her a break. "You've got potential," he said, his tone lighter now. "But don't let your guard down. Your enemies won't." Callan nodded, her chest tightening, with a mix of determination and unease. This was her reality now, and there was no room for hesitation. Later that evening, Calla sat across from Lucien in the study. Her muscles sore, but her resolve stronger than ever. "Tell me the truth," she said, her voice steady. "That's so special about my bloodline." Lucien hesitated, his eyes searching hers. "Your family was part of the pack," he said finally, "generations ago. But they left, severing their ties with us, and taking something valuable with them." Calla frowned. "What kind of something? Magic?" Lucien said simply, "Your bloodline carries a rare magic, tied to the pack's strength. That's why Jarek wants you, and why I need to protect you." Her mind raced. The weight of his words, crashing down on her like a wave. "You're telling me I'm some kind of key to your survival?" "Yes," Lucien said, his voice quiet, but firm. Calla stared at him, her chest tightening. "And you didn't think to tell me this sooner?" "I didn't want to overwhelm you," he said. He laughed bitterly. "Well, congratulations. Mission not accomplished." Lucien stepped closer, his gaze softening. "Oh, I know this is a lot, but you're not in this alone. I'll do whatever it takes to keep you safe." A sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. And for a moment, she didn't know what to say. "You'd better," she said finally, her voice quieter now. "Because if I go down, I'm taking you with me." Lucien chuckled softly, the tension between them easing just slightly. Fair enough, but as they stood there, the weight of their situation settled heavily between them, a reminder that the battle was far from over. Chapter 12. Calla stood in the middle of the estate's grand library, staring at the crackling fire and the massive hearth. Despite its warmth, her insides felt cold. The weight of Lucien's revelations the night before pressed on her like a lead blanket. Her bloodline carried a rare magic. Tied to the pack's survival. Jerry K wanted her as leverage. Lucien needed her to maintain his strength. And the pack, they barely tolerated her. No pressure or anything, she thought bitterly. She'd spent the morning trying to process everything, but the more she tried to make sense of it, the more impossible it felt. The sound of footsteps behind her made her tense. She turned to see Marceline entering the room, her sharp gaze narrowing as it landed on Calla. "Should have known I'd find you here," Marceline said, her voice chirping with disdain. "Looking for an escape in books, are we?" Calla crossed her arms. "What do you want, Marceline?" The blonde approached, her movements graceful but predatory. "I want to know what you're still doing here." Calla raised an eyebrow. "Oh, you mean," his sides being tied to this whole mess, "I'm my so-called magical bloodline, and not much, just enjoying the hospitality." Marcellini's lips curled into a frosty smile. "You think this is funny? Do you have any idea what your presence here has cost us?" Calla bristled. "Excuse me, last I checked, I didn't ask to be dragged into your supernatural. So, Paprano," Marceline said sharply. "But now that you're here, we're all paying the price. The pack is divided. Lucien is distracted, and Jerry K's rogues are circling like vultures, waiting for the perfect moment to strike." Calla's stomach twisted, but she refused to let Marceline see her falter. "And you think this is my fault?" Marceline stepped closer, her eyes cold and pierced. "You are our liability, Calla. Weakness Lucien can't afford. If you care about this pack, if you care about him, you'll leave." The words hit like a punch to the gut. But Calla forced herself to hold her ground. "You think running away will fix this?" Newsflash. Jerry K's not going to stop just because I'm not here. If anything, it'll make me an even bigger target. Marcellini's jaw tightened. Her expression didn't soften. "At least then you'd be out of our way." "Oh," Calla said, her voice trembling with anger. "And here I thought we were bonding." Marcellini's frosty smile returned. "Consider this friendly advice. You don't belong here, Calla. You never will." With that, she turned and left. her heels clicking against the polished floor. Kala sank into one of the library's armchairs, her chest heaving. Marcellini's words echoed in her mind, a relentless drumbeat of doubt and fear. Maybe Marceline was right. Maybe she didn't belong here. And as the fire crackled, and the tension in her chest ebbed slightly, another thought took root. Marceline didn't know her. None of them did, and if they thought she was going to roll over and let them decide her fate, they had another thing coming. Later that evening, Lucien found her in the garden. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the manicured hedges. Flower beds. Alice stood near a stone fountain, her arms crossed as she stared into the rippling water. "You've been avoiding me," Lucien said, his deep voice breaking the silence. Kala didn't turn to face him. "And you blame me." He stepped closer, his presence a quiet force. "You're angry." "Gee, what gave it away?" she said, her voice tinged with sarcasm. Lucien sighed, his hands sliding into his pockets. "I know. This isn't what you wanted, Kala. And I know it's not fair." She finally turned to face him, her eyes blazing. "Fair, Lucien. My entire life has been turned upside down because of you and your pack. And now on top of everything else, I'm supposed to just accept that. I'm some kind of magical battery for your alpha powers." "It's not like that," he said, his voice low but firm. "You're more than that. More than just your bloodline." "Am I?" she demanded, her voice breaking. "Because right now, it feels like that's the only reason anyone here even tolerates me." Lucien's gaze softened and he stepped closer, his presence steady and grounding. "I know this is hard, and I know I haven't made it easier. But you're not just here because of your bloodline, Kala. You're here because you're strong, because you matter." She stared at him, her chest tight. "Why am I just another piece on your chessboard?" His jaw tightened for a moment. He didn't answer. Then he reached out, his hand brushing against hers. "You're not a pawn, Kala. You're my partner, my equal." Her breath hitched at the raw sincerity in his voice. But before she could respond, he stepped back, his expression growing serious. "I won't force you to stay," he said quietly. "If you want to leave, I'll make sure you're protected. But if you choose to stay, it won't be easy. This life comes with sacrifices, and you'll have to face them head." "And if I stay?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "And we fight together," he said simply. "For the pack, for each other." The weight of his words settled over her, and for the first time, she felt the gravity of her choice. That night, Kala sat in her room, staring out the window at the moonlit garden. Arsline's harsh words echoed in her mind, mingling with Lucien's quiet promises. She thought of everything she'd faced since coming here, the fear, the doubt, the moments of clarity and strength she hadn't known she possessed. Running would be easy, safe. That staying, that was something else entirely. Her jaw set and she rose to her feet, determination flooding her veins. The next morning, Kala found Lucien in the study. He looked up from his desk as she entered, his expression unreadable. "I'm staying," she said, her voice steady. Lucien rose, his eyes locking onto hers. "On my terms." "No," she said firmly. "On mine." His lips twitched into a faint smile, glimmer of admiration in his gaze. "Fair enough." But even as they stood there, a quiet understanding settling between them, Kala knew this was only the beginning. "Thank you for joining us on this thrilling journey. So far, but trust me, the story is far from over. The twists, the revelations, and the emotions are only just beginning to unravel. You don't want to miss what happens next. It's where the narrative truly comes alive." Continue this adventure seamlessly by heading to the next part of the audiobook, where the story deepens and the stakes get even higher. Click the link in the description to dive straight in. Don't wait, your next chapter awaits, and you won't want to miss a single moment of it.